Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. After the jury heard the closing arguments, they were excused since it was 4 p.m. The judge sent them back to their hotel, where they were sequestered for the 2-week trial that followed a nearly year-long investigation. The defendant returned to the Denver County Correctional Center in Denver, and nothing more would happen until Monday when the jury reconvened. I decided to walk back to my room at the Hilton Garden in downtown Denver, stopping at a bar for a beer and a bite. I had just finished my burger and was halfway through my beer when I heard a woman behind me. "Hey, cowboy, buy a girl a drink," she asked. I turned around and recognized her. Jenna Burns. "Is that really you?" I asked. "Yes, it's me," she said with a smile. I invited her to sit and call the waitress. "How long has it been?" 17 years. I asked. 17 years, she replied. Jenna had been one of my best friends in high school, along with Chris Wallace and Robin Taylor. We were known as the Four Musketeers until her dad got a job in Boulder during our senior year. I hadn't seen or heard from her since. "I've been good," she said. "Went to the University of Colorado, graduated, got married, got divorced, and now work as a reporter for the Boulder Daily." "Wow, what happened?" I asked. She shrugged. "I was married, but he wasn't. After catching and cheating 3 times, I kicked him out. I think he ended up running a McDonald's in Grand Junction." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "So what brings you to Denver?" "I've been covering the Wallace trial. I saw you testify. I feel sorry for Robin. She didn't deserve to die like that." I stayed silent, thinking how Robin didn't deserve to die, though I would have preferred a harsher fate for her. That possibility was taken away by the man I once considered my best friend. "So, how are you, Chad Adams?" she asked. "Considering the last 16 years of my life have been a sham." "I'm okay," I said. "At least you have kids," she said. "Yeah, they're mine, legally," I replied. "You may not be their biological father, but you're their dad in every way that matters," she said. "You're probably right, but it doesn't make me feel better." "Look, I have a confession," she began. I wondered what she was about to say. "Every reporter wants your story. I want to tell you, if you'll let me. I understand if you have trust issues, but no one knows you like I do. We can sign a contract. You give me exclusive rights, and I protect you. My editor approved it. I won't publish anything without your approval." I realized she was right. Reporters from all major outlets were contacting me. It was overwhelming, but something told me I could trust her. "Okay, Jenna, you have a deal. How do we do this? Here, my hotel, or yours?" "What do you mean?" she asked. "I've wanted to visit the old homestead. It's only a couple of hours away by car. We have the weekend off since the jury doesn't start deliberating until Monday. Let's drive back, and you can show me where it all happened. You can tell me the details on the way, and I'll talk to your kids and parents if that's okay." I thought it would be a nice break from the trial and a chance to show Jenna the neighborhood and maybe repair our relationship. "Sounds good," I said. "Where are you staying?" "At the Hilton around the corner." "You?" "Same place. Wanna grab a few things before we go?" She nodded, and we agreed to meet at my truck in the parking lot. "You can't miss it," I told her. "It's a big blue cab." "Still the same chat with the biggest truck," she joked. "Give me about half an hour to change and grab some things." We hit the road, and by the time we got onto Highway 25 toward Colorado Springs, the sun had set. I was relieved since I disliked driving in the sun. Jenna had changed into a professional outfit, a denim skirt, and a white blouse, looking as beautiful as she did in high school. I couldn't help but notice her legs. She smiled. "I know what you're thinking, cowboy." "Really?" I asked. "You're wondering why you didn't sleep with me instead of Robin," she said. I laughed. "Is that your reporter's instinct?" "No, it's the way you look at my legs. just like in high school," she teased. "Legs like that are hard to forget," I told her. She smiled and took out a tape recorder. "So, is there a Mr. Right in Boulder?" "No. Since my divorce, I've focused on work. I've had trust issues with men and haven't met anyone I want to spend time with," she replied. "Sorry to hear that," I said. She laughed. Somehow I doubted. Damn those reporter instincts. "Shall we start this interview?" I asked. "Sure," she said, placing the recorder on the dashboard. "You don't mind if I write this down, do you?" she asked. "Not at all. I want you to get it right." I took a sip of coffee and began. "As you know, Chris, Robin, and I were close in high school. After you left, it was mostly just the three of us. I proposed to Robin after graduation, and she said yes. Chris and I joined the Marines and went to boot camp together. After training, we split up. He went into infantry, and I went into computer electronics. He ended up at Fort Bayfield in California, and I went to Fort Hawthorne in Virginia. A month later, Chris injured his knee and got a medical discharge. You'll notice he still has a limp. Couldn't he have gotten a desk job?" Jenna asked. "No, everyone in the courts has to be combat ready. Chris's father pulled strings to get him into the county," I explained. "His father was a county commissioner, right?" Jenna asked. I nodded. "Yes, that's how Chris got elected. I graduated, came home, and got married. Chris was my best man. Later, I found out he was also Robin's best man, if you know what I mean." "That cow," Jenna muttered. "Months after we married, Bob was born. A year later, I was sent to Japan for a year. Robin and Bob stayed in my inherited house. After that tour, we moved to Fort Shelby, where Jessica was born. Robin had a tough pregnancy and insisted I get a vasectomy. She said it could be reversed if we wanted more kids. Looking back, it's clear Chris's traits are in the kids," I said. "Didn't you notice when they were born?" Jenna asked. "It's a fair question," I said. "Chris and I look similar, same hair, eyes, even earlobes. The kids looked like me when they were little and had their mother's eyes and nose. It wasn't until they were older that I noticed the resemblance to Chris. You'll see the baby pictures when we get to my house." I finished my service, and we all came home. I worked at my dad's computer store and traveled a lot for business. "Did it bother Robin?" Jenna asked. "No, she liked it. It gave her time to bring Chris into our home and bedroom, which I found out much later," I said. "You mean she actually spent time with Chris in your bed?" asked Jenna. "Yeah, all the time," I replied. "That's why I burned the bed and mattress after she was gone." "I don't blame you," Jenna said. "I also burned the couch and chair Chris used. Robin's wedding dress went up in flames too," I added. "So, Chris was a regular guest at your house?" Jenna asked. "Yes, he even had his own chair. I didn't mind at the time since I thought he was a friend. He'd come over after church on Sundays. We'd watch the game, and he'd fall asleep in that chair. The kids called him Uncle Chris, mostly because Robin insisted. It annoyed me, but now I know why," I said. "Want to warm up my coffee?" I asked. "Ready for a pit stop?" Jenna turned off the recorder. "Sure. I could use a break." I nodded and took the next exit. After our break, we were back on the highway. "So you had no idea Robin was cheating with Chris?" she asked. "No, I was clueless. She never disrespected me. At least, not to my face. There was never a hint of it when I was home. They were careful," I said. "How did you find out?" she asked. "About a year ago, I was in Los Angeles for a month-long training. Robin and the kids emailed and called me daily. One weekend, Bob sent a picture from a fishing trip with Robin and Chris. "Look at this," I said, showing Jenna the photo on my phone. It showed Bob with a large fish, Chris next to him, and Robin on the other side with her hand on Chris's shoulder. "What do you see?" I asked. "They look so much alike, even the dimples," she said. "Exactly. And look at Robin's hand. What stands out?" I asked. Jenna enlarged the image. No rings, she said. Right. Guess where they were? I said, leading her to another photo album. Check this out. Her eyes widened. Is that what I think it is? She asked. Yes, my wedding ring and my great-grandmother's ring. And guess whose cigarette butts are in that ashtray? I said. Chris, she guessed. Yep. And the ashtray was on my nightstand, meaning Chris was in our bed, I said. Jenna started to tear up. How could she do that to you? And Jessica sent this, I said, showing her another picture. Yeah, she helped my mom clean the house and saw the rings. She took a picture and sent it to me. She was very upset, I said. I can imagine, Jenna said. Did she tell Robin? No. I asked her not to say anything. I also asked her to take the rings and mail them to me, I said. Jenna laughed. I bet Robin was frantic. Yeah, Jessica did everything I asked. Robin was going crazy looking for the rings. She even had Chris help search. They went through the garbage, sinks, everything, I said. So what did you do? Jenna asked. My course ended on Friday, and I came home on Saturday night. Robin met me, crying about losing her grandmother's ring. I asked all the usual questions and then pulled the rings from my pocket. She was stunned. How did you get them? She asked. I told her a trusted friend found them and mailed them to me. I didn't mention Jessica to protect her. I just said, don't put them in the ashtray next time Chris comes over. Her eyes went wide, and she started crying, telling me she loved me. I'm sorry, I said, seeing Jenna's reaction. I didn't mean to swear. That's all right, she said. I've heard and said much worse. So, what did you do then? I knew it was over between us then. I didn't have solid evidence of the cheating, just suspicions. I decided to investigate. First, I wanted DNA tests to see if the kids were mine. I bought surveillance equipment, motion-activated cameras, audio recorders, and bugged our cell phones. Everything recorded on my home server and backed up to the cloud. I installed it all when she went shopping. The DNA test was easy. One of our clients in Denver is a lab that does this testing. I took samples from the kids and myself, asking them not to tell their mother. When Chris came over that Sunday, he fell asleep in his usual chair, making it easy to swab his cheek. A week later, the lab mailed the results to the store, 99.9% probability. Chris was the father of both kids, meaning this had been going on for at least 16 years. And you had no idea? Jenna asked. No clue. She never gave me a reason to doubt her. Our bed life was normal. But a week after installing the equipment, I got the first video evidence. I was in Oklahoma City for a couple of days, and the kids were at my parents'. That night, Robin was home alone and called Chris over. While I was out of town, I logged into my server and saw them in our bed. The visual was tough enough, but hearing what they had to say cut even deeper. What were they talking about? Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Give me a minute, I muttered, eyes on the narrow, twisting road ahead. The darkness was dense, and this part of the county had no street lights or guardrails. I knew Chris's old pill-dealing crew had once run business out here. Even though most of them were behind bars, it made me worry. I turned on the high beams, flipped up the light bar, and cranked up the police scanner. After pulling my gun out from the glove box, I felt ready to keep going. We finally arrived at my driveway, and Jenna spotted a DS patrol car station outside. Who's that? She asked, pointing. That's part of our security team, I said. Ever since Chris was arrested, DSS has kept an eye on the place. Some of his people already tried torching it once, but we caught them in time. Now there's 24-hour security on the property, and DSS also watches over my family and the kids. Chris might be behind bars, but we're not taking any chances. I parked in the garage, and we walked over to greet the officer in the car. He rolled down his window and greeted me with a surprised look. Chad, I thought you'd still be in Denver for the trial. he said, stepping out of the car and shaking my hand. Jury went to deliberation this afternoon. This is Jenna Burns, a reporter from the Boulder Daily, who'll be with me this weekend, I replied. The officer tipped his hat to Jenna. Nice to meet you, ma'am. Things have been calm since the Rangers rounded up most of Chris's associates. My shift's nearly over, so you'll see my replacement shortly. I nodded. Appreciate you looking out for us. Once inside, I brewed a pot of coffee and showed Jenna around the house. It was built back in 1866 by Morris Morgan after he returned from the Civil War. Over the years, it's been expanded and renovated countless times, but some original details remained. Now it had 5 bedrooms, a large 3-car garage, and a covered porch that wrapped around the side. There were rooms for both kids, a master suite, and a playroom that doubled as a family room. Robin had even set up a sewing room. I suggested Jenna take the master bedroom since it had an attached bath, and I'd stay on the futon in my den. But she just chuckled, waving it off. Nonsense, she said with a grin. The beds are big enough for both of us. We're grown adults, Chad. I hesitated for a second, but her smile was reassuring, so I nodded. She grabbed her things and led the way to the living room. All right, I'm ready for the whole story. Let's get to it, she said. Just let me call the kids first, I replied. I dialed my parents and chatted briefly with my dad before talking to Bob and Jessica. They were excited to see Jenna and arranged to meet us for lunch the next day. After grabbing my coffee, I brought a stack of DVDs from my study. These might help, I said, handing her one. Her eyes widened at the number of discs. How many recordings do you have? Quite a few, I replied. Some are from the house, some from my office. There are scanned documents, photos, and audio files. I've backed everything up. I put the first DVD into the player. This one's a bit rough to watch, but it confirmed my suspicions. Listen closely. The video started with Robin walking into the bedroom, and Chris joined her moments later. She slipped off her rings, tossing them into the ashtray on my nightstand, and Chris, with a smirk, stubbed out his cigarette on them. To hell with his great-grandmother's ring, Robin sneered with a laugh. I glanced at Jenna, who was holding back tears as they started undressing. I fast-forwarded through the most explicit parts and paused it once they were lying on the bed, talking. Robin turned to Chris, her voice low. I'm expecting again, baby. Looks like you're going to be a father. Chris scowled. Didn't you take your pills? Yeah, but I might have missed a day or two, she replied, sounding indifferent. He grew in frustration. You know the rules, no protections. I can't handle another loss, she whispered. I've had 3 already, and the last one nearly did me in. Besides, Chad had a vasectomy after Jessica. That was your idea, remember? Chris paused. So, what do you want to do? I want to marry you and leave him, she replied. He's already catching on. I'm not the marrying type. Robin. Chad works and pays the bills. That's good enough for me. Robin laughed. Chad is so clueless. We could do it right in front of him, and he wouldn't notice. Then her expression darkened. Couldn't you arrange an accident, like with those guys before? Chris's tone turned serious. Those were people no one cared about. Chad's a different story. He's useful. Maybe we can work on it gradually. For now, head to the clinic in Twin Falls. They'll take good care of you. I'll keep an eye on Chad, and if he tries anything, I'll take care of it. Robin nodded, kissing him. You're the one. They started up again, and I turned off the video. Jenna wiped tears from her eyes. I hate her. And you live like this for 17 years. Sorry, Chad. For the kid's sake, maybe consider staying with her. Could you stay with someone who betrayed you for 17 years? I asked. No, I don't think I could, he admitted. Back at my office, I called the contacts Brad had given me, setting up meetings with a senior family attorney, a state prosecutor, and a federal investigator in Denver. I also updated my dad, who assured me he'd support whatever decision I made. Chris was bad news, But this is worse than I thought, he muttered. We need to get the kids out of there. We devised a plan. I tell Robin I had a business trip to Los Angeles, and while I was gone, my parents would take the kids to their house. Before heading out, I called Bob. You and Jess will be staying with Grandpa and Grandma for a bit. I'll explain soon, I told him. A few minutes later, my secretary announced that Chris was in the lobby. I placed my pistol on the desk and turned on the recorder. Chris sauntered in, smirking. I hear you saw Brad Carter today. What of it? I replied, meeting his gaze. If you're thinking of divorcing Robin, you'd better forget it. I won't let you drag me into court. Why, Chris? We were friends. How long has this been going on? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Since prom night, he sneered. Whenever you were gone, I was there, even on your wedding day. You were my best man, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. In hers, he replied with a smug grin. 9 months later, Bob was born. When you were stationed overseas, I was at your place most nights. The vasectomy idea, that was mine. We didn't want her to have your kids. I glared at him. In the future, you'd used my insurance for that. He shrugged. Sure. Now that you know, you'll do as I say, or I'll make sure something happens to the kids. Don't forget who's in control here, Chad. I own this county, the sheriff's department, and the courts. I own you. Play along, and things will be fine. Step out of line, and it'll be the end for you and your kids. You'd harm your own children. I asked, shocked. I've grown up, Chad. Maybe it's time you did too, he sneered, walking out. I copied the recording to a DVD, called my father, and sent a copy to my attorney. Dad, it's time. Chris just threatened me and the kids. Understood, he replied. I'll arrange for Bob to pick up Jess. We'll meet you at the house. I called the school, instructing them to let only my father pick up the kids. Then I called Bob, telling him to pick up Jess and go straight to his grandparents, no questions asked. I grabbed my weapon and left for home. When I arrived, Robin's car was there, but Chris's truck was gone. I walked in, hand on my gun. You're back early, Robin said as I walked in. Is Chris here? I asked. Why would he be? She replied, eyes wide with faint innocence. You know why. Maybe for an afternoon visit or a plan of my accident, I replied. Her face was drained of color. Chad, I'm so sorry. Watch this, I said, inserting the DVD. As Chris's voice played, her face twisted with guilt and shock. Chad, it's not what you think. We can fix this, she pleaded. Fix this, I scoffed. After all the betrayal, we're done here. I took her left hand, removed my grandmother's ring, and handed her my wedding ring. Now get out. She tried to stall, but I threw her purse at her. Just then, my dad's truck pulled in, followed by Chris. Robin smiled, thinking she had the upper hand. Now we'll see who has to go. It would go smoother if you just cooperated, Robin said, her tone smug. It would be easier if you cooperated, she taunted. Are you really going to do this? I asked. In a heartbeat, she replied. Just then, Dad blocked Chris's truck with his own and got out with his rifle. What are you doing, Adams? Chris yelled. I'm enforcing a restraining order, Dad said. What kind of restraining order? Chris asked. The one against you and Robin. Stay 500 feet away from my family and our property, Dad said. Get out of here. Chris stopped moving as 2 cars with flashing lights pulled up and 4 state troopers stepped out with their pistols ready. We'll take it from here, Mr. Adams, one officer said. Dad lowered his weapon. Is that her? The officer asked, nodding at Robin. Dad shook his head. The officer then handed Robin the paper. Mrs. Taylor, you must stay 500 feet away from the Adams family and their property. If you refuse, you'll be taken into custody. Do you understand? Yes, Robin said quietly. Excuse me, officer, I said. I'd appreciate it if you took Robin and Mr. Wallace into custody." "And why would I do that?" he asked. I hit play so they could hear the threat Robin made against me and the kids, I said. The officer gave her a hard look and pulled out handcuffs. "Mrs. Taylor, you're under arrest. Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he said. After handcuffing Robin and reading her rights, he radioed for another officer to arrest Chris. "You'll pay for this," Robin said as she was led away. "You're all going to pay." A van from a local TV station pulled into the driveway and a reporter and camera crew approached as Chris was being arrested. The reporter caught Chris's arrest on camera. "Do you know who I am?" Chris yelled. "Yeah, I know, and I don't care. You're under arrest," the officer replied. "I'll get your badge for this," Chris shouted, red-faced. I realized I should have mentioned their plot to eliminate me, but I didn't have the evidence with me. The news van moved so the patrol cars could leave. The reporter approached me, followed by my father. "Mr. Adams, why was Commissioner Wallace arrested?" she asked. "Making death threats is a crime, even for popular politicians like Chris and his married girlfriend." "Now, I have to take care of my kids," I replied. My father joined me as we walked away, leaving the reporter in shock. Chris's reputation took a major hit. My next stop was my parents' house, where I explained everything to my family. I hated telling my children that Uncle Chris was their biological father, but they needed to know the truth. At first, they didn't want to believe it, but the DNA test results proved it. "I don't care what that paper says," Jessica said. "You're my father, and you always will be." "I agree," Bob said. I was proud of them. We hugged and shed a few tears. After saying goodbye, I went back to my house, packed for a few days, and headed to Denver. "And that's when you found out how bad it really was," Jenna interrupted. "Yeah," I said, resuming my story after a sip of coffee. The next day, I met with Adam Smith, a Denver attorney known for his courtroom prowess. He had arranged a meeting with all 3 men I had contacted. I was surprised to see them all there when I arrived. "Sorry to spring this on you, Mr. Adams," Adam said, "but after that last video, we thought it best to meet together." I accepted his apology, and he introduced me to the others. John Hancock, a prosecutor from the state attorney's office, took charge. "Mr. Adams, I'm sorry for what you've been through. We had a lot of evidence against Chris Wallace, including drug, weapon trafficking, human trafficking, and 6 homicides. Your wife is involved too, especially in misconduct. The threats against you forced us to act quickly," he said. Kurt Torres, a Colorado Ranger captain, explained that the sheriff's department was compromised and had been temporarily replaced by Rangers and DSS officers. He stressed the urgency of the situation. "As for your divorce," Adam said, "I'll push for an annulment due to your wife's criminal activity and deception. If not, we'll file for infidelity and mental cruelty. Based on your evidence, I believe you'll get all your assets in custody of your children if you want." We discussed strategy for another hour. Adam handed me a DVD containing footage of my wife's actions. Some of it involved several men, including sheriff's deputies. John concluded with their plans for Chris and Robin. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Mr. Adams," he said. "We're going for the death penalty for Wallace. Your wife might get life without parole, but your lives are in danger. Be very careful. You and your children are lucky to be alive. Call us immediately if you see or suspect anything." "I hear you," I said. We shook hands and parted ways. My mind was spinning. The man I thought was my best friend was involved in drugs, weapons, and murder, and my wife was part of it. How did I miss this for 17 years? I thought. I got a frantic call from Bob. "Dad, come home now," he said. "What's going on?" I asked. "Just come home now," he said and hung up. I sped home. When I arrived, there were ambulances and police cars in front of the house. I rushed to the door as paramedics wheeled out a gurney. The paramedic pulled back the sheet, revealing Robin's face. "I'm sorry, Mr. Adams," the paramedic said. "She's gone." I wasn't that upset. Inside, I saw Chris on another gurney, his left shoulder shattered but alive. My kids and father were standing off to the side, unharmed. I hugged them. "What happened?" I asked. Dad explained. "We came to pick up a few things. Chris and Robin showed up. Jessica and Robin fought, and Chris pulled a weapon. I grabbed my rifle and walked in just as Chris pulled out his weapon. Robin tried to stop him, but he shot her accidentally. I shot Chris in the shoulder and called an emergency. Bob called you right after." "Yes, Robin was gone before the ambulance arrived." "It's okay, Dad. You did the right thing," I said. I remembered the security system was running and checked the footage. I showed it to an officer and made a copy. "Do you have that video?" Jenna asked. "Yes," I said, pulling a disc from the stack. I put it in a DVD player. The video showed Robin and Chris entering the house, followed by Jessica. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "You should be in jail." "We bailed out," Robin said. "You're coming with us." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Jessica said. "Leave now." Robin grabbed Jessica's wrist. "You're coming with us," she insisted. Jessica pulled away. "No way. I hate you," she yelled. Robin slapped her. "Yes, you are. I have a room for you in Twin Falls." Jessica hit her mother back. "That's not happening," she said. Robin grabbed her hands. "You're going to be our new star," Robin said. Chris grinned. "The boys will like you," he said. Jessica realized what they intended and struggled harder, breaking free. "I'm not going, and you can't make me." "Get away from me," she said. Chris pulled a weapon. "It's over for you and your brother," he said. Robin tried to reason with him, and Jessica screamed for her grandfather. "Wait, Chris. We agreed not to do it here. Let's take them to Pine Ridge Road. You know the place," she said. Chris shook his head. "No," he said. "Put the weapon down before there's an accident. We'll deal with them, but not here," she insisted. They struggled. A shot rang out, followed by a louder one. I stopped the DVD. "That's when Bob called me," I said. "You know the rest." Jenna wiped her tears as I stood up. "I'm done for the day," I said. "I'm going out back for a smoke, then to the cafeteria." Jenna followed. "I'll join you," she said. We took our coffee and walked to the back porch in silence. After a while, Jenna spoke. "I forgot how dark and quiet it is here. I'm used to the city," she said, looking at me. "Chad, you need to deal with this before it destroys you." "Easier said than done," I replied. "How do you accept that the woman you loved lied to you for years? My kids aren't even mine." "I understand a bit," she said. "My husband was a serial cheater, but not everyone is like that." "Yeah, I know," I said quietly. Jenna hugged me. "I'm here for you, Chad. Always," she said. "Thank you," I said. "I often wish we had met in high school." "I feel the same. Maybe if my dad hadn't transferred to Boulder, we would have. I was even jealous of Robin back then." "Really?" I asked. "But you were with Chris," she said. "Only because you and Robin were together." I had doubts about Chris. He told me he wasn't the type to get attached. "Well, no point crying over it now," I said. "If we had gotten together, you would be a reporter in the big city." "True, but sometimes I wish I could give it all up for a good man," she said, looking at me. "I believe you would," I said. After a while, we went back inside. I lay down on the couch, still concerned about Chris's friends, despite the DSS officer outside. Jenna understood. "Don't make a habit of it, cowboy," she said, smiling. I fell asleep and woke to the smell of bacon. "Rise and shine," Jenna said, standing over me in a long t-shirt. "Breakfast is ready." I went to the kitchen table, amazed at the spread. Pancakes, bacon, sausage, grits, toast, eggs, biscuits, and gravy. She even remembered peanut butter for the pancakes. A guy could get used to this, I said. Jenna brought fresh coffee. Hope you like it. It's been a while since I made breakfast for a man. It smells great. You'll get my mom's approval, I said. Didn't you cook like this for your ex? I asked. My ex preferred fast food. Dig in, cowboy. We have a lot to do today, she said. So, what's on the agenda? I asked, savoring the meal. First, I'd like to see your family. Then visit Robin's mother for insight into her. If there's time, we'll stop by the cemetery, and we'll need to go shopping. You're almost out of everything, she said. I devoured the food, stopping to sip coffee and praise her cooking. Robin hadn't made breakfast like this in years. I felt like I'd died and gone to heaven. I hugged and kissed Jenna, thanking her. That was amazing. I guess I'd better get ready. Please do. You need a shave, she teased. I showered and shaved, thinking about Jenna. In less than 24 hours, I found myself falling for her, just like in high school. Could it be that Jenna and I were meant to be? For the first time in months, I felt content. Jenna, now dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed her laptop bag and purse. Ready to go? She asked. We arrived at my parents' house, greeted by the kids running out as soon as I pulled up. I introduced everyone to Jenna, and we went inside. Jenna explained her plan and asked to talk to everyone one-on-one. We all agreed. Mom went to the kitchen to make dinner, and Dad took me into the living room. Jenna started with Jessica and then spoke with Bob. Dad and I waited, chatting about hunting, fishing, and soccer, avoiding topics related to Robin and Chris. A couple of hours later, Jenna asked to speak with my dad. I took the kids outside to play soccer. After about an hour, she finished with both parents and joined us outside until lunch was ready. The kids bonded with Jenna, and she enjoyed spending time with us. We played soccer until Mom called us for lunch. I felt like I had a happy family again. After lunch, we said our goodbyes. Jessica hugged me before I left. Daddy, if you don't ask her to marry you, I'll kick your butt, she whispered. I promised to think about it. How did the interviews go? I asked Jenna as we left. They went well, she said. I know you have trust issues, so let me explain. I interviewed everyone privately to get independent confirmation. It's not that I don't believe you, but I wanted them to speak freely. I appreciated her explanation. I understand, Jenna. You're being professional. Did you learn anything new? Yes, Jenna said. Jessica mentioned that Chris had been making advances toward her for a while. That son of a cow, I muttered. Your family loves you very much. They had suspicions about Robin, but didn't want to interfere. If they had known specifics, they would have spoken up, she continued. What else did you find out? I asked. I experienced what it's like to be part of a close-knit family, and I loved it. Thank you for including me, she said. The kids and I had a great time too. You made a big impression on them, I said. We arrived at Robin's mother Samantha's apartment. Do you want to interview her privately too? I asked. No, I think you and she should talk, Jenna replied. Samantha opened the door and invited us in. She moved slowly due to health issues and depression. Her husband had died in a mysterious accident years ago, and Robin's death left her alone. How are you feeling? I asked, hugging her. I'm fine, Chad, thanks for asking, she replied. She hugged Jenna. Jenna Burns, you're as beautiful now as in high school. Thank you for coming to see me. Jenna smiled as Samantha motioned for us to sit. What brings you here? Samantha asked. I explained what Jenna was doing, and Samantha nodded approvingly. So, what can I tell you? She asked. Mrs. Taylor, I'm curious. Robin and Chris's affair continued throughout her marriage. You must have known. Why didn't you say anything to Chad? Jenna asked. Samantha looked embarrassed. Yes, I knew, she admitted. I'm sorry, Chad. I should have told you. You didn't deserve this. How long have you known? I asked. Since the beginning, she said. During your year in Japan, Chris practically lived with Robin. They were careful when your family was around. I told her it was a mistake, but she didn't listen. If Robin wanted to be with Chris so badly, why did she marry me? I would have let her go if she had just said so. I said. She was confused, Chad. She loved you both in different ways. To her, you were stable and dependable. Chris was wild and adventurous. You were a support for her, and he was excited, Samantha explained. I'm sorry, Samantha. Robin slept with Chris on our wedding day, had 2 children with him, and plotted to kill me. Those aren't the actions of a loving wife, I said. I know it's hard to believe, Chad, Samantha said, but she did love you, at least at first. That's what she told me. What changed her so much? Jenna asked. People change over time, Jenna, Samantha said. Chris latched onto Robin and began to control her. I warned her once, but she said I'd regret it if I told Chad. Samantha looked at me. That's why I stopped visiting the kids, Chad. I couldn't face you, knowing what she was doing. Sometimes they scared me. Did you know about her decisions? Jenna asked. Samantha nodded. Yes, Robin told me. I warned her she'd get caught, but she shrugged it off, saying it was her choice, not yours. I suggested she divorce you, but she laughed and said she'd inherit everything soon anyway. How long ago was that? Jenna asked. About 1.5 years, Samantha said. I wanted to say something, Chad, but I was scared. Chris is terrifying. Did your husband know about this? I asked. I think so, she said. They were talking just before his accident. Samantha's husband was known as an excellent mechanic, yet his brake line mysteriously failed. It's all in the past now, isn't it? Samantha said. By the way, I don't blame you for not attending the memorial. I was hoping some of her friends would come, but it was just me and the priest, she added, wiping a tear. Thank you for paying for the cremation, Chad. I noticed you had her cremated in her wedding dress. You cremated her in her wedding dress? Jenna asked. I told you I burned her dress. I made sure she wore it in the wedding ring I gave her. It felt appropriate. Did you cremate the wedding ring too? Jenna asked. Yes, but not the engagement ring, I nodded. Thank you for making sure I got Robin's IRA, Samantha said. It helped a lot. Robin had an IRA? Jenna asked. Yes, when she was shot. It had $350,000. She also had $200,000 in a savings account I didn't know about. I put it in a trust for the kids' college, I said. Interesting, Jenna said, taking notes. She turned to Samantha. Is there anything else you can add? No, I think you know everything now, Samantha said. I'm sorry about how things turned out, Chad. I put my arm around her. It's okay, Samantha. Feel free to visit the kids anytime. They'd love to see you. She thanked me, hugged Jenna, and said goodbye. Don't be strangers, okay? We promised to stay in touch and left. You cremated her in her wedding dress and ring? Jenna asked as we got into the truck. It felt right at the time, I replied. Jenna took notes as we drove to the cemetery. We reached the columbarium where Robin's ashes were kept. The granite plaque read Robin Taylor with her birth and death years, nothing more. At least you treated her remains with dignity, Jenna said, mostly for Samantha's sake. If it were up to me, I'd flush her ashes down the toilet, I muttered. Interesting you used her maiden name, she added. She didn't value our family in life, so I didn't burden her with our name. They wanted me to write loving wife and mother on the plaque. I figured cheating tramp or lying cow wouldn't fly, so I kept it simple. Jenna took her pictures and then placed her hand on my chest. There's still a lot of anger in you, isn't there? Tell me, Chad, did you ever mourn her? The truth was, no, I hadn't shed a tear since she was shot. Her lies, cheating, and threats against the kids destroyed my feelings for her. Part of me was ashamed, and it brought tears to my eyes. Damn it, I didn't want to cry in front of Jenna. I turned away, but she made me face her. You need to get it out of your head, Chad, before it eats you up, Jenna said. Let it go, and you can move on. What kind of life is this, Jenna? I asked. Everything I thought I had was a lie. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Jenna hugged me tightly, kissing my face occasionally. That's what happened. I sobbed uncontrollably. Jenna held me until I calmed down. I wiped a tear from her cheek. She was my friend, too, remember? The four of us. Chris, Robin, the four musketeers. I loved her like a sister. I hate what she became, but I loved her anyway. You did too. You married her, raised 2 kids with her. That must mean something. You're probably right, I said. Dan right, cowboy. I'm here for you, Chad, as long as you need or want me. I get it, I told her. She smiled and patted my chest. We need to get to the store. What do you want to do about dinner? How about a trip to Charlie's for steak and a van tonight? I asked. You're asking me out in front of your wife's ashes. She smiled, kissed me, and looked at Robin's marker. Bye, Robin. Your husband is asking me out, she said. I whispered, bye, honey, to the marker and returned to the truck. Are you okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, starting the pickup. Let's get ready for tonight. We stopped by the farmer's market, bought groceries, and headed home. It finally felt like home with Jenna. I showered, shaved, and dressed, waiting for Jenna to finish getting ready. She came down in a denim skirt, white blouse, and cowboy boots. She looked stunning. I offered her my arm, and we left. Charlie's restaurant was known for great steaks. After dinner, we had a beer and watched couples dance. Do you want to dance? I asked. Of course, Jenna said. We danced the night away. 2-step waltzes, slow dances, even line dancing. During a slow dance, Jenna kissed me deeply. I love you, Chad Adams, she whispered. Always have and always will. I love you too, Jenna Burns, I replied. She lit her lips nervously. Take me home and make love to me, cowboy, she said. Let's get this situation under control, I said, doing a bad John Wayne impression. She smiled, took my hand, and led me to the parking lot. Take me home now, she purred. She started kissing me in the car. Thank God for tinted windows. Are we almost home? I asked her. Good, she whispered. We parked in the garage and rushed inside. Later, we lay on the bed, her in my arms. Just 36 hours ago, I was a broken man. Now, with Jenna, I felt hope. I knew what I wanted to do, but feared she'd think I was rushing. Screw it, I thought. Full speed ahead. A penny for your thoughts, she said, looking up at me. I don't want it to ever end, I told her. Me neither, she replied. What do you propose to do about it? Her reporter instincts were kicking in again. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small box holding my great-grandmother's engagement ring. I'd had it cleaned after taking it from Robin. Jenna focused on the box as I explained the ring's history. It had been passed down through generations, starting with my great-grandfather in World War I. You see, Jenna, this ring symbolizes my love for you in over 100 years of Adams family history. I understand if you prefer a new ring, but this one means a lot to me. With a tear in her eye, Jenna said, Yes, I will marry you and be proud to wear your great-grandmother's ring. But there's one condition. Condition? I asked. Promise you'll cancel the vasectomy. I want to have a house full of kids. Maybe one day we can pass the ring on to one of our grandchildren. I smiled, put the ring on her finger, and we kissed before making love and falling asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon. Jenna was making another legendary breakfast. We ate, packed for the trip to Denver, and showered together, leading to another session of lovemaking. I called the kids to share the news. Woohoo! Bob shouted when I told them we were getting married. Jessica was just as happy. Good for you, Daddy, she said. You've got a real winner. Congratulations, my dad said. Welcome to the family, Jenna. "Thank you, Mr. Adams," she said. "Call me Dad," he laughed. "Okay, Dad," Jenna replied, laughing. "I'm so excited for you too," my mom said. "Have you set a date?" "Not yet," Jenna said. "I have things to finish and Boulder first. It will be soon." "Bob, I think it would be great if you and Jessica visited your grandma Samantha occasionally. She misses you," I suggested. "Okay, Dad," Bob replied. We said our goodbyes and loaded into the truck. Something Jenna had said to my mom stuck in my head. "What are your plans?" "Long-distance relationships don't always work out," I said. "Did you know Jake Carson is retiring as editor-in-chief of the Daily Record?" She asked. "I didn't," I replied. "I sent my resume last week before we met, and they wanted to talk to me about the job. He won't retire for 3 months, and I need 2 months to finalize things at the Boulder Daily." "What if you don't get the job?" I asked. "I'll quit my job and live with someone I know here," she teased. "No one else is interested in the job, and the board wants a woman with my experience. I have ideas to improve circulation," she added. "Sounds like you've got it figured out," I said. "I like to be prepared," she replied. "No matter what happens, I'll support you 100%. She wrapped her arms around my neck. "That's why I love you so much," she said. "If I stayed at the Boulder Daily, they could send me anywhere, anytime. I'm tired of living in hotels. The paycheck might not go up, and it might even go down, but living in one place with you is worth it. If I don't get the job, I'll write online, freelance, or maybe write a book. I'd rather spend all my time in bed with you." "That's the plan I like best," I told her. "Let's go outside." After closing up the house, I picked some flowers from the front garden. "Mind if we make a stop?" I asked. "Oh, do you have a girlfriend hiding somewhere?" she teased. "You know better," I replied. Her question still bugged me, though. "You're right. I'm sorry," she said. "We both got burned, so it's a sore subject. I was thinking about what you said at the cemetery. It's time to put it behind us," I said. "Good for you," she replied. We pulled into the cemetery and walked to Robin's ashes. I placed the flowers in a vase. "By the way, Robin, Jenna, and I are getting married. Thought you'd like to know," I said. Jenna added, "And if the kids are okay with it, I plan to adopt them." We said our goodbyes and walked back to the truck. "Do you really want to adopt the kids?" I asked. "Hell yeah," Jenna replied. "They deserve a mother they can trust. Are you okay with that?" "Of course," I replied. Marrying Jenna felt right for all of us, especially for Jessica, who needed a strong, loving mother as a teenager. We drove back to Denver mostly in silence, with Jenna working on her story. When we arrived at the hotel, she suggested, "Why don't you move into my room? The paper's paying for mine until this is over." "At least let me pay part of the bill," I said. "You can pay for our dates," she replied. I checked out of my room and moved in with Jenna. That night, we went out for steak, danced, and enjoyed another night of passion. The next morning, we got to the courthouse early. The jurors began deliberations right away. Jenna did her job as a reporter, taking testimony and talking to observers. By 1:30, the jury had reached a verdict. Chris sat emotionless as the jury entered. "We have a verdict, Your Honor," the foreman said, handing the verdict to the bailiff. The judge read it and asked if the verdict was unanimous. It was. In People v. Chris Wallace, the jury finds the defendant guilty on all charges and recommends the death penalty, the judge announced. Chris's attorney had gambled on the jury being unable to unanimously agree on the death penalty, but he lost. Chris was guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and various trafficking charges. Each juror confirmed their agreement with the verdict and punishment. "Mr. Wallace, I agree with the jury. If any case deserves the death penalty, it's this one. I order you to be transferred to Huntsville State Prison and executed as prescribed by law." "May God have mercy on your soul," the judge said, striking the gavel. My lawyer gestured for me to follow him. We caught up with the officers escorting Chris. Chris glared at me, defeated. "Where are you looking at, idiot?" He spat. "I'm looking at a worthless piece of crap," I said. Now I know what that looks like. My lawyer handed Chris 2 forms to sign. One relinquishes all parental rights to Bob and Jessica Adams. The other outlines the disposition of your estate, 1/3 to Samantha Taylor, 1/3 to a trust for Bob Adams, and 1/3 to a trust for Jessica Adams. Chris, furious but defeated, signed both forms. "Are you happy now?" he asked. "I will be," I replied. "By the way, Jenna and I are getting married, and she's adopting the kids. Enjoy hell." My lawyer and I left. I didn't see Chris again until his execution. Yes, I peed on his grave, but not in front of Jenna. She wouldn't have approved. Finally, the nightmare was over, and I looked forward to a new chapter with Jenna. True to her word, Jenna let me read the stories she wrote about me, and I was impressed. It went viral, leading to several talk show appearances for Jenna. She even won a Pulitzer Prize for it. The Boulder Daily was reluctant to let her go, but gave her a bonus and a recommendation when she left. The Daily Record welcomed her as the new managing editor, and within a year, the paper's circulation tripled, prompting expansion and more hires. We chose a backyard wedding, inviting family and friends. Jenna's parents came from Boulder, along with some of her friends from the Boulder Daily. Her dad walked her down the aisle, shaking my hand warmly. Bob was my best man, and Jessica was Jenna's maid of honor, making it a true family affair. After our vows, the priest introduced us as Mr. and Mrs. Chad Adams. Bob put his arm around Jenna and said, "Welcome to the family, Mom," and Jessica hugged her, saying, "I love you, Mom." "I love you too," Jenna replied, hugging them both. My father handed us an envelope with 2 tickets for a week-long Caribbean cruise as our honeymoon. "Thanks, Dad," we said in unison, starting a new adventure. 10 months later, Jenna gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. We named them Morris, after my grandfather, and Alicia Marie, after Jenna's grandmother. On their birthday, I met George Mason, a local politician, who congratulated me and mentioned the upcoming election. "You brought down a real menace, like the man who shot Liberty Gallants," he joked. Except John Lane wasn't waiting in the shadows this time. "Thanks, but I can't take a pay cut. I have 2 new mouths to feed," I laughed. "You could still run your business," he suggested. "Maybe, but there's another reason," I said. "Power corrupts, and I'd rather be home with my family." I knew my life with Jenna and the kids was all I'd ever need, I thought. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.